They say blood is thicker than water, but in the freezing mountain air of Aspen, Colorado, blood turns into ice faster than you can say family. My name is Evelyn Tales. And on that freezing December night, I did not merely step out of a warm dining room. I walked away from a lifetime of emotional extortion that I had been funding with my own hard-earned savings. It was 7:15 on a bitter evening in Aspen, Colorado. The snow was falling in thick, suffocating sheets over the grand Victorian estates lined along Red Mountain Road. My breath crystallized in the dark air as I stepped out of my Range Rover, holding 2 freshly baked, piping hot apple cranberry pies in my hands. My fingers were numb through my leather gloves, but my heart was light, anticipating the cozy sound of holiday laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warm hugs of my 2 grandchildren, Leo and Mia. I expected the smell of roasted pine, the crackle of a fireplace, and the quiet dignity of a mother being welcomed into her son's home. Instead, when I rang the chime, the heavy oak door opened only a few inches. My son, Ethan, stood in the narrow threshold. He avoided my eyes completely, staring intensely at the damp floor mat near my boots, as he mumbled a quick, nervous greeting. The rich, appetizing aroma of roasted turkey and rosemary drifted out from the kitchen, but the moment I stepped past the hallway into the open-concept dining room, the temperature inside felt colder than the blizzard raging outdoors. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the chalet looked out over the pitch-black, snow-draped peaks of the Rockies. The dining table was set with elaborate luxury, polished mahogany, heavy crystal goblets, sterling silver cutlery, and neatly folded linen napkins, but there were only 5 chairs. Sitting right at the head of the table, in the large, high-backed carved velvet armchair, where I had sat every single Thanksgiving and Christmas for the past 4 years, was Victoria. Victoria was my daughter-in-law Chloe's mother. She sat back gracefully, sipping a glass of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, her eyes locking onto mine with a look of quiet, triumphantly icy disdain. Next to her sat Chloe, looking effortlessly polished, while my grandchildren were utterly absorbed in their digital tablets, completely oblivious to the silent humiliation taking place in front of them. I stood there in my heavy wool trench coat, holding 2 heavy glass pie dishes, waiting for Ethan to fetch a folding chair from the home office. I waited for Chloe to offer a soft, polite apology for the oversight. I waited for anyone to act like a civilized human being. Nobody moved. The room remained dead silent, save for the rhythmic snapping of pine logs in the stone fireplace. Keeping my voice as perfectly smooth and level as polished marble, I looked directly at my daughter-in-law and asked if there was a spare chair in the garage or the guest suite. Chloe didn't even bother setting down her wine glass. She swirled the dark red liquid slowly, a faint, condescending smile lifting the corner of her manicured lips. She told me with insufferable calm that they had decided to keep the holiday intimate this year, just the core family. I stared at her, unblinking. I reminded her clearly that I was Ethan's mother, and that I was the one who had cleared the massive security deposit for this chalet. Chloe merely shrugged, waving her hand dismissively, stating that priorities were priorities, that Victoria had flown in on a private charter from Palm Beach. And therefore, she earned the head of the table. Space was limited, she added without a hint of remorse. I slowly turned my head toward my only son. Ethan stood beside the roasted turkey with a silver carving knife in his hand. I waited for him to speak. I waited for him to say, "Chloe, stop, this is my mother." Instead, Ethan picked up the knife, sliced a thick piece of juicy turkey breast, and placed it gently onto Victoria's plate. He served his mother-in-law first, right before my eyes, without uttering a single syllable in defense of the woman who had carried him, raised him, paid off his law school loans, and saved him from bankruptcy just 8 months ago. I did not scream. I did not drop the hot pies onto the imported marble floor. I did not shed a single tear. Screaming was for the weak and tears were for victims. Evelyn Tales was done playing the victim. I walked calmly back to the entryway, set the 2 hot pies onto the dark wood console table, turned my back on them, and walked out into the freezing Colorado night. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed through my soul. The bitter mountain air struck my face like an icy whip, but inside, a cold, unwavering clarity was taking root. I started the engine of my Range Rover, but I didn't pull out of the driveway immediately. I sat in the darkness, watching the golden light glow through the high windows of the 4,500-square-foot luxury townhouse. This stunning property in Aspen was costing $8,500 every single month. When Ethan lost his senior partnership at his Denver legal firm, Chloe had thrown a tearful fit, wailing that moving the children out of their elite private school district and high society social circle would ruin their lives. So, like a devoted mother, I had stepped in. The lease agreement was registered under Ethan's name, but the property management group's payment portal was linked directly to my personal Chase private client account in Manhattan. In addition to paying their entire rent, I had handed Chloe a secondary black credit card for groceries, household maintenance, and children's emergencies. I unlocked my phone, the soft blue screen casting a glow in the dim interior of my SUV. I opened my banking application. With 3 deliberate taps on the glass, I navigated to the recurring payment schedule for Aspen Real Estate Holdings. I clicked on the Auto Debit Authority, Cancel Payment, Confirm. Next, I opened my credit card settings. I looked at Chloe's Authorized User tab. In December alone, she had run up a balance of $3,400, spent mostly at luxury ski boutiques, high-end beauty spas in downtown Aspen, and gourmet wine shops. Groceries, apparently. I tapped the screen once more. Lock card permanently. Confirm. I put my phone down, put the car into drive, and slowly steered down the quiet, snow-covered suburban road heading south toward Denver. Through my rearview mirror, I could see the distant, warm glow of their dining room window. They were probably laughing, drinking my wine, eating the turkey Ethan had carved, completely clueless that the financial foundation beneath their feet had just vanished into thin air. When I arrived at my private, quiet residence in Cherry Creek, Denver, 3 hours later, I didn't pace around in anger. I made myself a steaming cup of chamomile tea, changed into soft silk pajamas, and sat down near my library fireplace. For the first time in 10 years, the heavy, suffocating pressure in my chest was completely gone. I opened my laptop and began looking at luxury travel itineraries. A 3-week solo expedition to South Beach, Miami, and a private cruise through the Caribbean sounded magnificent. I had put my own retirement dreams on hold for years, just to ensure my son's family lived in luxury, but tonight proved that sacrifice without boundaries only breeds contempt. They didn't view my generosity as a gift, they expected it as their absolute right. Boxing Day morning arrived with clear skies and brilliant sunshine over Denver. I woke up early, fed my cat, and sat in my glass conservatory enjoying a dark roast coffee. At precisely 11:45 a.m., my phone began vibrating violently on the glass tabletop. It was a text message from Chloe. Evelyn, the card was declined at the Aspen ski equipment shop. The machine says account locked. Fix it immediately, the kids are waiting to hit the slopes. I read the message, took another slow sip of coffee, and set the phone down. 10 minutes later, another message arrived, far less polite. Evelyn, hello. I am standing in front of a line of people with a cart full of designer gear. This is incredibly embarrassing. Unfreeze the card now. I picked up the phone, unlocked the screen, and typed a simple, icy response. I locked the card permanently. I am no longer funding your personal lifestyle. Figure it out. I hit send and tossed the phone onto the velvet couch. I didn't block her number. I wanted to observe the unraveling. I knew Chloe's exact psychological pattern. She would immediately throw a furious temper tantrum, call Ethan, and demand that he force his mother back into submission. Sure enough, less than 4 minutes later, my phone began ringing uncontrollably. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring 4 full times before I swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. Mom. What on earth are you doing? Ethan's voice was borderline hysterical, echoing loudly as if he were pacing in a hallway. Chloe is stranded at the checkout counter. She's mortified. She is not stranded, Ethan, I replied with absolute calm. She has her own personal debit card in her purse. She can easily use her own money. Ethan paused, caught off guard by the sheer lack of emotion in my tone. Did you lock her card just because of yesterday? Because of a stupid seating arrangement at dinner. I locked the card because the line of credit belongs to me, Ethan, I answered, leaning back against my armchair. Yesterday didn't make me irrational. Yesterday simply clarified my life priorities. If I am not a core part of your family, then my bank account will no longer be a core part of your budget. Mom, come on, Ethan raised his voice. His tone shifting into the whining pitch of a spoiled teenager. Victoria flew in from Florida. We couldn't make her sit on a wooden stool in the kitchen. You are completely overreacting. I didn't yell, Ethan. I didn't make a scene, I reminded him softly. I simply removed my financial support. You cannot treat me like an unwelcome stranger at the table and expect me to pay for the feast. You can't just cut us off without warning, he yelled into the receiver. Chloe needs that card for the kids. Chloe was buying $800 designer ski goggles and luxury cashmere scarves. Ethan, I said, my voice cutting through his lies like a razor. I can see the pending transaction descriptions on my banking app. The card stays locked. Good day. I disconnected the call before he could spit out another desperate excuse. My hands were steady. For years, I had tiptoed around Chloe's toxic moods and Ethan's spineless passivity, terrified that if I didn't keep writing checks, they would cut off my access to my grandchildren. But I realized with crystalline clarity that they were using my love for the kids as emotional blackmail to keep my wallet wide open. 2 days later, the quiet tranquility of my Cherry Creek home was shattered by the sound of tires screeching on my driveway. I looked through the wooden blinds. Ethan stormed up my stone walkway, his face red and his jaw clenched in fury. Without even knocking, he pulled out his brass spare key, unlocked my front door, and stepped directly into my entryway. We need to talk right now, he barked, pulling off his gloves. I walked slowly out of the kitchen, holding an empty teacup, and stopped 3 feet away from him. We certainly do. But first, hand over my key. Ethan froze mid-step, his hand resting on the brass door handle. What? My house key, I said, extending my open palm. Place it in my hand right now. Ethan stared at me as though I had suddenly started speaking an ancient dialect. Mom, don't be ridiculous, I'm your son. I've had a key to your house for 10 years. And you used it today to march into my home uninvited so you could scream at me, I said, keeping my hand perfectly still in the air. Give me back my key, Ethan. He scoffed loudly, shaking his head in disbelief, but the unyielding firmness in my eyes terrified him. He reached into his coat pocket, unclipped the key from his ring, and slammed it down onto my open palm. Fine, you want to play ridiculous mind games. Fine, Chloe is furious. She had to leave half the items at the resort because my personal checking account was completely overdrawn. That sounds like a serious financial budgeting failure that you and your wife need to sit down and solve, I said, slipping the key into my cardigan pocket. We rely on your financial help, Mom, Ethan yelled, crossing his arms frantically. You know my firm hasn't cleared my severance pay yet. How are we supposed to live? Then you should have thought about your survival before you let your wife banish me to the hallway during a dinner I funded, I said, my voice dropping to a low, powerful frequency. I am your mother, Ethan, not your personal automated teller machine. If you treat me like trash, I will treat you like acquaintances. And acquaintances do not pay your monthly bills. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, his aggressive posture instantly deflating into utter desperation. Look, I'm sorry about Thanksgiving, okay? Chloe was just stressed trying to impress her mother. Just unlock the card and I swear I'll make sure you come over for a nice dinner next week. I have already made other plans, I replied smoothly, stepping forward to open the heavy front door for him. And the card remains permanently closed. Have a safe drive back to Aspen, Ethan. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, finally grasping the terrifying reality that his mother was no longer his safety net. But the true financial catastrophe hadn't even struck them yet. The first day of January was only 4 days away. The remainder of the week passed in sublime, golden silence. I spent my days reading fine literature, visiting art galleries in downtown Denver, and confirming my luxury reservations for Miami. On the morning of January 1st, I was out in my backyard, filling the bird feeders when my phone began ringing incessantly. 7 missed calls from Ethan. 6 frantic text messages from Chloe. The Aspen property manager just emailed us. The rent transfer failed. Where is the $8,500? Call us immediately, this is not a joke. I wiped my hands on a garden towel, walked inside, poured a glass of chilled sparkling water, and dialed my son's number. He answered on the very first ring, his voice breathless and chaotic. Mom, the management portal says the rent payment was canceled. Did your bank decline the transfer by mistake? I canceled the payment mandate myself, Ethan, I said with crisp precision. I am no longer paying your $8,500 monthly rent. There was a dead, suffocating silence on the other end of the line for 5 whole seconds, followed by a sharp, horrified gasp. Are you completely insane? Ethan screamed. $8,500. We don't have that kind of cash sitting in our checking account. Then you need to contact your landlord immediately to request a payment extension. Or ask Victoria to wire you the money, I suggested softly. She is, after all, your core family priority. You can't do this to us, we signed a legal lease, he shouted. You signed a lease, Ethan, I corrected him instantly. My signature is nowhere on that legal paperwork. I was simply doing you an act of grace. That grace has officially expired. Mom, we'll get evicted. Where are your grandchildren going to sleep? He pleaded, resorting to the ultimate weapon of emotional guilt. You won't be evicted today, I replied coldly. Colorado law gives you a statutory grace period to fix your default. I suggest you and Chloe start selling your luxury possessions, cancel your private club memberships, and figure out how to live within your actual means. I ended the call without waiting for a response. 2 hours later, Chloe's silver SUV screeched to a halt outside my house. She marched up the walkway, her face distorted with rage. I didn't bother opening the main door. I simply unlatched the glass window panel and spoke through the brass security screen. Evelyn. Open this door right now, Chloe demanded, glaring through the mesh. Lower your tone, Chloe, or I will shut the wooden door and call the Cherry Creek Security Patrol, I warned quietly. You are completely out of your mind, she shrieked, clutching her designer handbag. You are destroying your own son's life and traumatizing your grandchildren just because your pathetic ego got hurt over a chair. I am not destroying anything, I corrected her, looking her dead in the eye. I am simply stepping back and allowing 2 grown adults to experience the full financial cost of their own existence. You wanted to be the supreme matriarch of the house, Chloe. You wanted to make the rules and set the priorities. Now you get to pay the bills for it. That is how adulthood works. Chloe stood on my porch, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, desperately searching for a comeback that did not exist. She couldn't threaten to keep the children away from me, because without my capital, her pristine high society life was falling apart at the seams. Goodbye, Chloe, I said, and firmly closed the heavy wooden door, turning the deadbolt with a sharp, satisfying click. January proved to be an absolute reality check for them. Through old friends in the Denver legal circle, I learned that Ethan and Chloe were forced to execute an emergency lease termination with the Aspen landlord to avoid a public eviction lawsuit. Chloe was seen frantically liquidating her entire wardrobe of designer handbags and jewelry on luxury consignment portals. Ethan was forced to take on low-paying legal document review jobs, working 18 hours a day just to keep their heads above water. By mid-February, they moved out of the Aspen chalet and rented a modest, basic 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class suburb outside Denver. There were no ski resorts, no private charters, and no luxury spas. A week after they settled into their new apartment, Ethan called me. His voice was quiet, stripped entirely of his former arrogance, carrying the heavy weight of a man who had finally been forced to grow up. "Mom," he said softly, we're mostly unpacked. The apartment is small, but it's affordable. Leo and Mia were asking if you wanted to come over for Sunday dinner, just simple home-cooked pasta." "Just us?" I paused, leaning back against my armchair, looking out at my pristine, sunlit garden. "Is your mother-in-law visiting?" I asked mildly. "No, Mom," Ethan sighed deeply. "Victoria is in Florida, it's just us, and I made sure there's a chair set for you right at the head of the table." "I appreciate the gesture, Ethan," I replied with smooth, elegant calm. "But my flight to South Beach, Miami, leaves this Saturday morning. I will be spending the next month traveling through the Caribbean." "Oh," Ethan whispered, the disappointment heavy in his chest, though he didn't dare complain. "I understand." "Have a safe trip, Mom." "Thank you, Ethan," I said gently. "When I return, we can meet for a simple lunch at the park with the kids. Let us rebuild our relationship slowly, on the foundation of mutual respect, not financial dependency." I hung up the phone and felt an overwhelming wave of absolute peace. Sitting on the sunny balcony of my oceanfront resort in Miami, a week later, watching the turquoise Atlantic waves crash against the golden sand, I realized the ultimate truth of life. You cannot buy respect, and you should never have to pay for a seat at a table where you belong. Setting firm boundaries does not make you a cold mother. It makes you a human being who demands dignity. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can ever make is to walk away in absolute silence, close your wallet, and let people face the unvarnished reality of their own arrogance. Always remember, you are a priority, not an option.